The special counsel, David Weiss, has indicted President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, in connection with a gun he purchased back in 2018. He's charged with 3 crimes. We're going to bring in CBN chief political analyst David Brody to discuss. David, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
What are we looking at here?
Well, possibly 20, 30 years in jail. I mean, a couple of these carry a 10-year sentence out of the 3 charges, 10 years, and a 5-year sentence or a 5-year penalty, plus $250,000 in fines. But look, I mean, this was expected, Dan. This was expected because David Weiss, the special prosecutor here, was under enormous pressure to do something with Hunter Biden after that plea agreement fell through a few months ago. And so there's a lot of politics involved in this, and there's a lot of ideology involved in this, which of course we can get into. But, these are obviously very serious charges. Whether or not Hunter Biden will serve 1 day in jail, let alone a year in jail, is really unknown at this point. But obviously it's just an indictment, and we'll see what happens as it relates to the trial upcoming.
Yeah, you mentioned the politics involved in it, and I think it's hard at this point. I mean, we see all the indictments flying around at former President Trump, and I think people are initially going to be thinking politics, but you think there's a good chance some of these could stick?
Well, I do. And let me just be clear when I say politics. I'm not suggesting that it's because, Hunter Biden just has Biden under in his name, and therefore they had to get a Biden. I don't necessarily think it's that, though, quite frankly. Let's be honest. Republicans are going after the, quote, big guy, right? They're going after Joe Biden. If in essence they can get Hunter Biden on some of these other charges, maybe he could be the fall guy in all of this. In other words, Hunter Biden, there's a lot there. There's a lot of smoke there, potentially fire as well in these charges. Get him to potentially serve some jail time and then just call it a day, and maybe the whole Joe Biden situation will go away. It won't go away. I mean, the Republicans are going to go after Joe Biden. And so this idea that maybe even Hunter Biden is getting charged because the Democrats and liberals and the left want this to go away, that's not going to happen.
Right, like getting their pound of flesh and they throw it out there and hope that it satisfies the political monster there.
Yeah.
What kind of arguments can we expect to see, politically and then also legally, David, on both sides of this thing?
Well, the Biden team is going to argue that there was a plea deal in place, and I understand that plea deal became controversial. And let's just understand what was in that plea deal. I mean, here's the bottom line. I mean, not that it's that complicated, but David Weiss, who reached the plea deal, the original plea deal with Biden's attorneys, basically put in the plea deal that, you know what? We're going to go ahead, no jail time here, but we're going to make sure that, in essence, that there wouldn't be any sort of future charges in anything that might come up in the future on anything. And we're talking about what we know to be potential money laundering charges, tax fraud charges, potentially sex trafficking charges, also unregistered foreign lobbying issues as well. This is what Republicans want the DOJ to go after Hunter Biden on. Well, that plea deal basically said none of that was ever going to come up. If you take the plea deal, we're not going to charge you with anything. And the judge said, hold on for a second. No, we can't do this plea deal. So that is, but however, the Biden lawyers are going to argue that, wait a minute, the plea deal was in place, that there were jail time. There was no jail time originally with the plea deal. So why all of a sudden are you now doing, possibly 20 to 30 years in jail for this? So that's going to be part of their argument here.
Is there any precedent that you know of or aware of, David, where cases where drug use was a factor in firearm related charges?
I don't. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't be an expert in that. So I couldn't answer that for you. What I can tell you is that ultimately these are serious charges. And I think the real question now becomes what's going to happen going further? Because here's the thing, Dan, and this is important to understand, is that everybody might be like, wow, big headline, Hunter Biden indicted, and call it a day. But listen, the Republicans are going to say, and it's not just, forget Republicans, it's going to be the MAGA folks, especially Donald Trump and the MAGA folks are going to say, hold on for a second. This is, nothing compared to what the real crime is, they're going to say, and then they're going to start listing what I just listed just a few minutes ago. And I think that's the potential other shoe to drop here. We're going to have to wait and see how much more evidence is there on some of these money laundering charges. I say charges, they're not official charges, but they're allegations, I should call them. And then many of these other issues as well, because that's where this is really going. And this is not going to satisfy clearly Republicans. Not that it's meant to satisfy the MAGA base, but the truth of the matter is that there's a lot of smoke here, Dan. And it's not just with Hunter Biden, it is with President Joe Biden. Let's be clear that this impeachment inquiry is in a way loosely, if not directly, tied to what we saw today with the Hunter Biden indictment, because ultimately there's a sense here that this impeachment inquiry is going to turn up a lot more evidence, and that's going to not just implicate potentially Hunter Biden, but also his father.
Well, of course, we have to talk about 2024 and all of this, because clearly it's going to play a role. And we're already starting to see, David, a lot of Democrats, pundits and left-leaning folks on TV and mainstream media really pushing for Biden to either step aside or to be challenged by another Democratic challenger here in the primary, which would be a very rare occurrence, especially in modern times, to have an incumbent president challenged by their own party. So what are you seeing on that front, how all this ties together?
Well, the drum is starting to beat louder and louder for Joe Biden to exit the race. We know privately Democrats, top Democrats, really don't want him to run. They won't say it publicly, but they'll say it privately. The New York Times has reported on this. Then we have the polling that shows that basically roughly 3/4 of Democrat voters don't want to see Biden run. And then this drops this week on Hunter Biden. So it's pile on to the point where will the pressure point be finally that Joe Biden will say, you know what, there's too much here. I've got to just step down for, quote, the good of the country, the good of the party. Not step down, but in terms of not running again in 2024. That seems to be the trajectory we are on. Whether or not it actually happens, whether or not Joe Biden decides to take that dramatic step remains to be seen. But I can tell you this, inside the Democrat Party, that's exactly what they want to happen.
Yeah, very, very interesting stuff. We'll, of course, be following it. Any other final thoughts on this, David, you want to leave us with?
Well, I would just say this, is that David Weiss, clearly the special prosecutor, is compromised. I mean, he was the guy that originally struck the plea deal with Biden's lawyers to basically give Hunter Biden a sweetheart deal for no jail time. And then all of a sudden, a couple months later, it's like, well, you know what? I think we'll actually put him in jail. And so, he had a cover face, or he had a save face, excuse me. And I think that's a big part of this. I mean, how do you go from saying, we're going to give you a plea deal with no jail time to all of a sudden we might put you in jail for 25 years? How in the world does that work? I mean, the folks that are close to Biden and Democrats are going to say that's ridiculous. And to a degree, they have a point. It just shows that David Weiss has been compromised all along. He was under pressure to do something after that plea deal fell apart. And this is the something, what we saw this week.
All right. CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody. Appreciate your time, sir.
Thanks, Dan.